So, over the past few years, we've received a whole lot of fantasy anime infused with elements typical of role-playing games. And when it comes to the leading characters of these kinds of shows, we can typically expect either someone starting at square one, or someone absurdly overpowered. But in the case of Goblin Slayer, we received neither, or maybe it's more like a hybrid of the two. Hey, how are you? I'm Slice of Otaku, and I want to talk to you about Goblin Slayer, the Overpowered Weakling. Goblin Slayer's world is this fantabulous realm with truly a myriad of paths one may undergo. Yet by his own decree, Goblin Slayer has essentially sentenced himself to hunting goblins day in and day out with little to no rest in between. His thoughts perpetually racked with possibilities solely pertaining to the extermination of the tiny devils, and as an adventurer, he has succumbed to this very existence for over 5 years. What once spawned from malice and resentment would eventually shift to enjoyment and pleasure, which was no doubt the gradual metamorphosis towards addiction and obsession. Goblin Slayer is remarkably good at what he does. The goblins may not possess any sort of culture of their own, as their Paleolithic tendencies lead them to utilizing just what they steal from others, but he understands them like no one else does, or even cares to for that matter. The reason being that he himself may be considered to be a human goblin, a comparison that he himself proposes. Drenched in the blood of their innards, he smells of them. Conscious of their traps, maze-like dwellings, and typical caste system, he thinks like them. Invading their place of residence, slaughtering their kind young and old, pillaging their possessions with little regard, he acts like them. Goblin Slayer is so thoroughly experienced in this field that despite only fighting the literal weakest of over 50,000 different types of monsters, he managed to obtain the Silver classification, the third highest rank an adventurer can have. And you know, realistically speaking, with the highest ranking, Platinum, having only been given to a total of 16 heroes of legend in all of the guild's history, and the second highest, Gold, typically being reserved for those in the national government, Silver is the highest you'll see of an independent adventurer. And although Goblin quests are usually left to fledgling adventurers, since payments are just about whatever a few morsels of coin some farmers can scrape together, because Goblin Slayer goes solo and doesn't have to split the profits amongst party members, he's able to make a pretty good living, where money isn't a concern of his. And it's not like there's ever a shortage of such quests either. Now, this is all fine and well, but once again, Goblin Slayer is very much like the goblins. Despite being such a high-ranking adventurer, he's virtually useless against the other dark forces of his world. Everything he does and has at his disposal happens to be geared towards goblins and goblins alone, down to even the length of his weapons. And so as the world he inhabits changes, due to things like the resurrection of the Demon King and the spread of dark forces, so too will the nature of his ongoing battle against the goblins. When the High Elf, Lizard Man, and Dwarf offered him a quest to hunt goblins, he agreed without hesitation and intended to handle the situation by his lonesome. And considering the fact that the goblins were being led by an ogre, a massive brute of a creature with human intelligence to boot, in all likelihood Goblin Slayer would have perished. And so for me, the thought of this super specialized combatant being thrust into such unfamiliar circumstances is exciting, which isn't to say that hunting goblins isn't already hype as it is, because goblins are highly adaptive creatures. Certain variables like their location, the inclusion of hobgoblins and shamans, possession of wolves, holding of hostages, previous experiences, and the number of their forces very much allows for a ton of diversity in what may initially come to mind as a straightforward and simple fight, and I love that. The fact that we're able to maintain the super badass factor that he has going on, while also being exposed to new things at the same time that he does, is really awesome. Not only that, but the underdog aspect of his character, despite being such a high rank, is yet another duality that I'm looking forward to being explored more. Most adventurers loathe him, in part because of how comparable he is to a goblin himself, spawning rumors of how he may be holding Priestess captive, but also because his very existence conflicts with their own. Because adventurers adventure, and he just doesn't do that. He sticks to the same thing all the time, which can seem a little cowardly or strange. But at the same time, humble citizens adore the idea of him. He's this meticulous enigma capable of slaughtering the inherently evil beings known as goblins without falter. The reality is, in the vast majority of cases, there are no dashing heroes in goblin stories because it's usually a band of ill-equipped beginners that either get killed, injured beyond recovery, or survive and distance themselves from society. He takes on the tasks that the government and other skilled adventurers just don't. And so they sing praises of his name, covered in as much mystery as it is blood. And so with all of this in mind, although it may have gotten off to a controversial and somewhat rocky start with its first episode, and I myself wasn't feeling it all that much for a while, it's growing on me. Probably because I'm so fascinated by the growth of Goblin Slayer himself. And I'm curious if you guys feel the same way. Like, are you interested in him as an anti-hero main character? And does his overpowered weakness help you care for the story more so? If you enjoyed the video, please let me know what else you'd like to see us cover in the future, and check out the other videos that we have uploaded thus far. Thank you all so much for watching, and have an awesome day. I love you.